I never expected a simple waitress to shatter a billionaire's ego with just one sentence. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It was a stormy Thursday afternoon, the kind when the clouds hung low and heavy, almost threatening to swallow the world whole. The diner was a dive, tucked away at the end of Main Street, where the linoleum tiles were cracked, and the coffee had a persistent bitterness clinging to every sip. I was serving tables, trying to make ends meet, wearing my frayed apron with a tinge of grease, just another nameless face in a sea of faces. Then he walked in. The door swung open, and with it, a gust of cool air followed him like a red carpet. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with deep-set eyes that framed the weight of his arrogance. Jonathan Price, a name that echoed in the circles of fortune, his family's wealth built like a fortress. I could feel the murmurs ripple through the diner, the gasps, the whispers. People noticed him immediately, as if the world around us faded into oblivion. It was always the same. A rich man's presence demanded attention, respect, even fear. He sat at the counter, ignoring everyone around him. The clatter of plates faded, and even the grease-slicked jukebox hushed under the gravity of who he was. I struggled to keep my hands steady as I poured his coffee, the warmth slipping through my trembling fingers. Each word I uttered felt like delicate glass. "How can I help you today?" My voice cracked slightly, brimming with uncertainty. He looked at me, but it wasn't the gaze of someone seeking service. No, it was predatory, scanning, sizing up prey. "You can start by bringing me a steak. Rare." I felt my heartbeat thunder in my chest, echoing louder than the clanks of silverware. How many lives had he crushed? He didn't know me, didn't care. Yet, in that moment, the tiny office space in my chest closed in. I bit my lip, gathering what little courage I had. Folks in town feared him. They would laugh nervously at his stories of power. But I would not. I leaned in, my voice steady. "We don't have any rare steaks here, sir. Just what the grill can manage." The silence was thick. You could slice it with a knife. The diner felt like it held its breath. His smile faltered, a crack in the flawless facade. "Excuse me?" He looked as if I had just defiled his very existence with those words. Without thinking, adrenaline rushing, I smiled back at him. "Just making sure you know. Here, we've learned to do good with what we have." The words spilled out, unfiltered and raw. I will never forget the look on his face. The shock, the disbelief, and then something darker underway, rage simmering just below the surface. A billion-dollar ego punctured by a simple waitress, a nameless shadow in his world. And just like that, the balance shifted. People began to murmur again, low whispers rising to a crescendo. I could feel the weight of their gazes. Some were shocked, others curious. What would he do next? Would he lash out? Would the power dynamics ripple in a disastrous wave? My mind raced as I stole glances at him. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You really think you can stand there and challenge me?" His voice dripped with venom. I stood frozen, reality swirling around me like a whirlwind. I could taste the panic rising in my throat, but deep down, a flicker of hope ignited. Maybe today, just today, I could break free from the chains of fear. Yet I knew the risks I was taking. As the tension climbed, and silence threatened to engulf us, the diner held its breath. Something shifted, but I didn't yet know what it would mean for either of us. But in that moment, something unthinkable hung in the air. A question. Could one simple waitress change the narrative woven into the threads of existence itself? Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air in the diner crackled with tension, a heavy weight pressing down on every shoulder. Time seemed suspended, heartbeats echoing in unison with the tableware's muffled clinks. I sensed the eyes of the patrons pinning me in place, torn between awe and apprehension, unsure whether they were witnessing a moment of bravery or a recipe for disaster. Jonathan's eyes bore into me, cold fires sparking behind his otherwise composed facade. The shock of my words had momentarily incapacitated him. Yet, there was something darker brewing beneath the surface, the flicker of ire igniting. I could almost picture the gears in his head turning, his rich, privileged world challenging this intersection with simple reality. Before I could gather my thoughts, a small voice chimed from the back of the diner. "Hey, leave her alone, man." It belonged to Tommy, a local teenager who'd been coming to the diner with his mother since he was just a kid. His mom had been battling cancer for the last year, and Tommy often leaned hard on the older waitresses for comfort. For a moment, my heart leapt in gratitude. Even in such an intimidating environment, courage blossomed in unexpected forms. Jonathan's gaze flitted away from mine, momentarily softened by the interruption. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" He shot back, the edge in his tone clear as glass. "I'm just a guy who works in a diner. I don't know much, but I know when someone's getting bullied," Tommy replied, his voice shaking more with anger than fear. A flicker of warmth surged through me. He was trying to protect me. The moment hung there, a fragile cocoon of potential. A part of me felt buoyed by this unexpected ally while another part worried for him. Was he challenging a bedrock of privilege? In the next breath, Jonathan's features hardened. "You have no idea who I am. You think you can throw around words with me?" His voice dropped, making a graveyard of the air around us. Tommy stood his ground but faltered slightly. The look of disdain flickered back onto Jonathan's face. I saw what I had done. I had not only irked a powerful man but had spit in the face of his wealth, his Pridean affront to everything he stood for. My heart raced as the ramifications began to unravel in my mind. "Look," I said finally, trying to soothe the hostility that threatened to erupt. "I'm not trying to challenge you. I just thought I don't care what you thought." He interrupted, his voice rising. "You don't get to think in my world. You're just a waitress." The diner soaked in his words, each syllable a shatter of glass. It was no longer just about steak. It was my essence, my role a ripple in his grand scheme that stirred a tempest. I felt my palms grow clammy, but through the storm of my thoughts, I clutched to that small ember of hope. In the blink of an eye, anger ignited a spark within me. "And you're just a man sitting at a counter. You can charm and intimidate those who want to believe you're more than that, but in the end, you're just a man like anyone else, a man who thinks he can step on people without consequence." For a moment I could see Jonathan falter at the rawness of my words. A flicker of vulnerability crossed his features, encroached by the realization that a simple waitress had forced him to look beyond his lavish identity. It was then that something whispered in my gut that maybe, just maybe, my voice had the potential to create a crack in his impenetrable wall. But just as the thought flared, Jonathan's anger returned with a vengeance. He shot up from his seat, the clatter of his chair startling everyone in the diner. "Enough!" he boomed, his furies cascading towards me like an ocean wave, ready to wash away every vestige of courage I had clung to. But before he could unleash any more wrath, the elderly man who often sat at the corner of the diner, Mr. Hall, stood shakily. "Just because you're rich doesn't mean you're above anyone, son," he rasped, hefting his frail frame with an authority born from wisdom and years. "Be careful where you step. You never know what tree might bear fruit." The room quaked in silence again, the unexpected testament of Mr. Hall resonating in the corners. Jonathan's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing visibly. My heart beat faster, unsure whether to brace for an explosion or surrender in this battle of wills. "Get out," Jonathan finally said, seething, and the air changed once more. But not from any display of power or wealth. It shifted under the weight of words filled with implications. As he turned to leave, I called out, "I don't want any trouble. Just remember this. Darkness doesn't need a crown, just an audience." With that, he paused briefly at the door, his back to me. A half-hearted laugh escaped his lips, a bitter thing that carried the faintest quiver of uncertainty. You think you've won? This is far from over. He stepped outside, the ding of the bell above the door signifying something profound much more than just his departure marked a shift in my own narrative, one carved from raw defiance. As the diner resumed its rhythm, the remaining patrons resumed their hushed conversations, echoes of Jonathan's arrogance lingering like smoke. But beneath it all, a budding sense of camaraderie thrummed in the air, a connection that had been forged between the diners and me. Yet even as I searched their faces, a new tremor settled in my gutter realization that I had awoken something in Jonathan, a beast that could backfire at any moment. In my desire to disrupt the status quo, had I inadvertently set off a storm I could not control. My heart pounded with uncertainty, knowing that I had not only challenged a billionaire's ego but opened a doorway to something fueled by his need for retribution. And now, with every passing second, the question remained, how would this explosive exchange shape both of our fates? The diner hummed back to life, yet I felt the shadows stretch longer, coiling around my heart. Patrons shared nervous glances, each clink of cutlery reverberating with unspoken thoughts. I could feel them weighing the implications of what had just transpired. It was a fragile camaraderie weaved together in the tension that laced the air, promising both solidarity and danger. Tommy slid back into his booth, tension still crackling in his young frame, but my heart twisted knowing I'd put him in the line of fire. Even more unsettling was an unfamiliar tightness in my chest, a budding triumph mixed with apprehension. Had I truly taken a stand, or merely provoked a beast lurking in the darkness? "Are you okay?" Tommy asked, blue eyes wide with concern. It would be easy to dismiss the tiny rebellions of innocence, but in this moment, his presence anchored me. I nodded, forcing a smile despite my quaking insides. Behind me, a low murmur of conversation resumed, hesitant whispers drifting through the diner like falling leaves. It seemed no one was willing to vocalize the disquiet yet, each soul unsure if they had just witnessed a spark or a funeral pyre. "Let's get back to work," I said, casting my gaze down to the scattered dishes food remnants as visible evidence of the emotional storm. People need coffee refills. I poured myself into the rhythm that had once felt comforting, hoping to drown out the anxiety coursing through me. Yet every clatter of porcelain brought a ripple of doubt. Jonathan loomed in the background of my thoughts as if his presence lingered in every word, every interaction. The diner was now a battleground, the stakes made higher by my careless challenge to his authority. What would he do next? After what felt like hours but was only a few frantic moments, a gust of wind rustled through the open door, signaling the arrival of a new customer. A figure shaded by the waning light entered, followed by the clearing of a throat. The diner shifted its attention toward the newcomer, a woman, likely in her mid-30s, whose demeanor commanded attention despite her disheveled appearance. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her once bright eyes seemed dulled by life's burdens. "Table for one, please," she said, her voice strong but weary. I caught the glimpse of a faded tattoo peeking from beneath the sleeve of her threadbare jacket, a reminder of dreams long dimmed. As I led her to a booth, my curiosity bubbled. "What can I get you?" "You'll take a coffee? Black?" she murmured, her gaze drifting over the diner as if searching for something lost. There was an unmistakable weight to her words, an unspoken story buried beneath the surface. I couldn't help but wonder what battles she had fought, the ones that echo in the quiet spaces between what is and what could have been. With the coffee brewing, I returned to Tommy and he leaned in, eyes wide with bright curiosity. "Who is she?" he asked, glancing after the newcomer. I shrugged. "Not a clue. We don't all get to carry a story around for everyone to read." Suddenly, the door swung open again, displacing the warm air that had nestled with us. Jonathan reappeared, a shadow unfolding from sunlight into the diner. The atmosphere shifted, a tangible gasp stilled the chatter around me as he strode back to the counter with an air of authority that I should have known. "I'd find you all here." His gaze swept across the diner, taking stock of the facetious mixture of fear and grim determination. "You think you're heroes, don't you?" He locked eyes with me, and that moment was a jolt to the heart. "Maybe we just don't want to feel powerless anymore." I shot back with an unexpected spark I didn't know still flickered within me. That he leaned closer, his voice low and dangerous. You're mistaken. What you just did doesn't come without consequences. And trust me, I always collect. As I held his intense gaze, a chill unfurled through my bones. I had thrown down a gauntlet, and he planned to retrieve it with vengeance. Tommy shifted uneasily in his seat while Mr. Hall clenched his fist on the table, eyes narrowing in concern. Could sense the air thickening again, dread intertwining with defiance. It was one thing to challenge superiority. It was another entirely to confront the dark side of power. Let's calm this down, I said, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. We're all just trying to get on with our lives. Lives? He scoffed, the bitterness edging into rage. You think you have the luxury of normalcy, little waitress? I can assure you that's a leaf that can be easily turned. Then, with a predatory smile, he glanced at the woman in the corner who had just received her coffee. Or maybe some of us are already caught in a web they can't escape. I followed his gaze, feeling the weight of his words crush the tiny ember of defiance. The woman's expression rippled with recognition, her eyes locking onto mine. Fear twinged within me as a sudden thought crashed over the clamor of my mind. Was she linked to him? Do you know her? I dared to ask, voice trembling with urgency. Jonathan's smile widened, a predatory glint overtaking his features. Let's just say, she has her own secrets, much like everyone else here. And just like that, the air shifted once again. The ripples of hope I had painstakingly nurtured warred against the tangible sense of dread that flooded the diner. With each heartbeat, I felt an inescapable reality settle around us, the intimations of a journey more complicated than I had ever imagined. What kind of alliances lay ahead? What unexpected darkness was about to unfurl? The clock ticked mercilessly on, but time was no longer on my side. The tension in the diner hung like a thick fog, and even the ticking clock seemed to stutter as the atmosphere crackled with unspoken fear and hidden truths. As Tommy shifted uncomfortably, glancing from me to Jonathan, I could feel the pulse of dread quickening, an unyielding reminder of the precariousness of our situation. My heart raced within my chest, caught between the desperate flicker of defiance and the shivering dread that Jonathan's threats evoked. Oh, you know her? I had asked, and I hated the weakness that had slipped into my voice. The woman in the corner opened her mouth as if to speak, but then hesitated, her eyes darting toward Jonathan like a wounded animal calculating its escape. Perhaps you should focus on your customers. He sneered, stepping away from our confrontation, but not before leaving behind the lingering heat of his menace. The weight of his presence receded, but the shadows of his words clung to me like clinging vine. I returned to the coffee machine mechanically, pouring liquid into mugs as if the rhythm could ground me on some solid plane. Each splash of dark brew resonated with the weight of unasked questions. The woman's gaze, choked with a desperate history, tugging at my heartstrings. Whatever Jonathan had meant by his connections, I couldn't shake the feeling that her story was tied to mine in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. As I slid the fresh cup of coffee to her booth, the woman looked up, gratitude flickering in her weary eyes. Thank you, she whispered, her voice touched with a raw vulnerability. I didn't want to draw attention. Is he bothering you? I asked gently, the words slipping out like salt on an open wound. She shook her head slowly, but that small gesture felt heavy with unspoken burdens. Not in the way you think. A shiver bushed through her shoulders, and suddenly it felt as though we were cloaked in the same tense fabric of secrecy. An invisible thread of connection pulled tighter between us. Sometimes we collide with the past we thought we'd buried. Tommy, filling the space next to me at the counter, gave me a questioning look. My heart ached for him, too innocent, too tender-hearted to understand the complications unspooling in this tiny diner. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, he had given me a reason to hold on. Did you ever feel an emptiness that pulls at you? The woman continued softly, her gaze penetrating. Every day, I admitted, the words almost foreign as I acknowledged the void within. Talking about it felt like tempting fate, but there was a courage to honesty that washed over me with surprising warmth. Sometimes it feels like a part of you aches for something you can't name. She leaned in, eyes deepening with an intensity that mirrored my own shadowed thoughts. Until something forces you to remember. A chill brushed over me at her words. Was it possible she too had felt the weight of Jonathan's control, the way he had turned a community into fractured pieces? Can you tell me your name? I asked hesitantly, offering a bridge of trust across the chasm that separated us. Lena, she replied, and with the name came a mist of memories I couldn't reach. I had the feeling Lena carried the weight of many lives. Hers, like mine, shaded by Jonathan's looming presence. Before I could reply, the door swung open again, gusting in a sharp wind that rattled the curtains and momentarily drew every eye. A tall figure stepped in, silhouette framed against the fading light outside. Just what I needed to see. Jonathan's voice wafted in with a smirk, swallowing the air we'd just shared. Looks like you're making new friends. My heart sank. What do you mean? Lena here has a way of attracting trouble, he taunted, his eyes narrowing, gleaming with malicious intent. I should have warned you. People like her tend to create waves. And we wouldn't want any surprises now, would we? My nerves hummed with anxiety, the sense of vulnerability rising like a tide. Jonathan's presence felt suffocating, like a storm closing in. I glanced back at Lena, her expression conflicted, eyes darting between me and the man who's become the tempest in our lives. Let me buy you both a drink, Jonathan offered mockingly, and I could feel the air thicken with a mixture of fear and loathing, just to celebrate your newfound alliance. Stop it, I retorted, defiance clawing its way back to the surface. We aren't afraid of you. At that moment, I noticed a flicker of something shift in Lena's eyes. It was fear, yes, but beneath it was something else, an ember of resistance, a challenge that mirrored my own. In that brief exchange, our fates seemed entwined, like vines creeping toward the light. But before I could grasp the moment, Jonathan stepped forward, the smile slipping from his face. His eyes replaced with a storm that promised trouble. You should be, he warned, voice dripping with disdain. Because this is just the beginning of your reckoning. I felt a tremor beneath the weight of his words. My heart thudded in my chest as everything shifted once more. Familiar warmth unraveling into icy uncertainty. Surrounded by those restless shadows, I sensed the convergence of destinies, all leaning toward an uncertain climax. My anger bubbled within, but overshadowed by fear of what was to come. Would Jonathan strike first? Or could I find strength in our tiny coalition against his tyranny? Just as I opened my mouth to respond, Lena quickly grabbed my hand, her grip firm and anxious. You don't know what he's capable of. You have to be careful. The worry in her voice resonated deeply, mingling with the urgency of the moment. Our eyes locked, barriers momentarily lost among the chaos. What do we do? I whispered, heart racing in anticipation, unsure of whether our fragile alliance could withstand the storm approaching. But before she could answer, the diner's familiar hum turned foreboding, and I could feel the clock's merciless tick echo the pulse of impending danger, moments away from unraveling, seconds away from a truth neither of us were ready to face. The diner had become a battleground, the air thick with unspoken words. I could feel the weight of Lena's grip on my hand, grounding me amidst the chaos that radiated from Jonathan's presence. His eyes flickered with amusement, as if we were but pawns in a game he relished playing. Your little friendship isn't going to protect you, Isla, he sneered, his voice low enough for only us to hear. I'd advise you to tread carefully. The deeper your ties grow, the harder you'll fall when you're cut loose. Lena's shiver echoed my own dread, yet I couldn't help but respond with a tremor of defiance. We won't let you dictate our lives. The fire of youth, Jonathan mused, mockingly playing with the very thing that fueled our bravado. But fire can burn you, too. Something in his gaze shifted, a bitter amusement replaced by a flicker of anger. It sent a chill down my spine, though I couldn't decipher whether it was warranted or fueled by my own fears. I knew then that Jonathan was not merely a man wielding power. He was a predator lurking at the edges of our fragile alliance. As he retreated, leaving behind the scent of menace that hung like smoke in the air, I turned to Lena, seeking reassurance, strength, anything to bolster the trembling resolve within. What do we do next? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the terror in my chest boiling into panic. She hesitated, searching my eyes, perhaps desperately hoping for a spark that could ignite a plan. We find out more about him. Knowledge is our only weapon now. Before I could respond, the bell above the door jangled, drawing my attention. An elderly woman entered, her frail frame almost camouflaged in the dim light. She shuffled forward, her face lined with a map of stories and sorrows, and as her eyes met mine, she offered a gentle smile. There was a kindness in her gaze that pierced through the tension, a reminder of humanity amid the wreckage. "Can I help you?" I asked, instinctively leaning toward her warmth, desperate to escape the venom of our previous conversation. "I came to say thank you," she said, her voice fragile yet warm as she seated herself at the counter. "For being so kind to my grandson, Tommy." "Tommy?" I echoed, glancing back at him. He was busy wiping down the tables, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around us. "Yes, he's been a light during a dark time," she said, a smile persisting despite the weight of her words. "I know he means the world to you." Though her words were simple, they fed the flickering hope that had begun to grow within me. Here was someone, despite the encroaching shadows, offering gratitude and grace amid the chaos. Maybe there was still kindness left in the world, something worth fighting for. Lena seemed to sense it too, her expression softening as she engaged with the old woman. "How's he been doing?" she asked, her voice imbued with genuine concern. For the briefest moment, the weight of Jonathan's threats lifted, replaced by the soothing balm of shared humanity. We all stood intertwined in the fleeting moment of hope, suspended away from the chaos surrounding us. But even so, the uneasiness still danced at the fringes of my thoughts. Just as the elderly woman began recounting a story of Tommy's childhood, laughter puncturing the oppressive atmosphere, the door swung open violently again. The blast of cold air carried a sharp resonance, and Jonathan returned. His face twisted with something darker, more menacing than before. "I've had enough of this charade, Isla," he declared, cutting through the warmth like a knife. There was an unsettling finality in his tone, an ominous foreshadowing of the tidal wave of chaos ready to crash down. "Leave her alone," I blurted, my heart racing with raw emotion. The flicker of hope from the old woman's kindness became a wildfire of courage deep within me. "This is your last warning." But rather than retreating into shadows, Jonathan advanced. His face twisted into a grin that felt too sharp a predator reveling at the sight of his prey resisting. "You really think a simple waitress can stand against me? You're painfully naive, Isla." With a flick of his wrist, he gestured toward the back entrance. "What if I told you I have something that could make you reconsider your bravado?" Lena's apprehension surged next to me, and I could feel the taste of betrayal in the air. "Don't let him manipulate you," but Jonathan cut her off. "You see, this isn't just about you or your affable little diner," he said, his voice low and menacing, laced with implications that sent tremors through my body. "There are bigger stakes involved. People you care about, people who might bear the consequences of your decisions." My heart dropped as his words sliced through the protective veil I had tried to weave around Tommy and the others. I looked toward the old woman, dread creeping in as I realized the cruel possibilities Jonathan could unleash. "Enough," I shouted, my voice cracking with anger and anxiety. "No more games. What do you want from me? In due time you'll understand, Isla. But consider this. Every choice leads to a consequence. Choose wisely." With that, he turned abruptly, striding out, leaving the atmosphere heavier as a dark riddle hung in the air. I stared into the void where he had been, heart racing, knowing every second mattered. Would I be able to withstand the storm he promised lay ahead? In my heart, I could feel the world beginning to unravel, the fragile threads woven around us quaking at the slightest disturbance. "Are you okay?" Lena's voice broke through my thoughts, laced with genuine concern. I nodded, but as I did, an unexpected revelation crept in from the corner of my Minda warning. "Maybe we aren't just fighting for ourselves," I murmured, lost in the thoughts that assaulted me present danger intertwined with the past scars. "We may have to confront what has been buried within us to save those we love." Lena nodded, determination replacing the fear that threatened to crack her resolve. It was a shared understanding that flickered between USA promise to fight whatever Jonathan would throw our way. But just as a fragile alliance began to coalesce around us, a deafening silence descended upon the diner. It was then, through trembling breaths and pulsing hearts, that the sounds of fury echoed in the distancia, harbinger of the storm rising on the horizon. An involuntary ripple of fear surged through me as I realized we were not just running from Jonathan. We were standing at the precipice of the darkness brewing within ourselves. A reckoning was coming whether we were ready or not. In that moment, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, the weight of impending choice crushing down. I could either leap into the unknown or cling to the flimsy strands of safety that would forever tether me. Unraveling or rising, there was no middle ground. The diner sat in an uneasy silence, the aftermath of Jonathan's presence settling like a thick fog, obscuring the once bright warmth that filled the room. Lena and I exchanged glances, our breaths still shaky and unsteady, echoing the turbulent whispers of our hearts. The elderly woman at the counter had turned her attention toward us, her pale eyes reflecting both concern and wisdom, as if she sensed the storm brewing inside. "What will he do?" she asked softly, knitting her frail fingers together. The simple question bore an unbearable weight, but I found myself reaching for the answer I didn't truly know. "Things are about to get messy," Lena replied, her voice steadying into a resilient calmness I wished to embody. "But we're not backing down." I tried to nod confidently, yet inside, a tempest raged. The feeling of vulnerability entwined with a profound resolve was the paradox of hope. I turned back to the old woman. "We won't let him hurt anyone," I promised, though the tremors gripped my voice. Just then, Tommy approached, breaking through the haze lingering in the kitchen with a bright smile, oblivious to the heaviness in the air. "What's up? You're all looking more serious than ever. Did someone forget to refill the coffee?" "Just a word from one of our regulars," Lena said, her tone shifting as she adopted a lightness that danced awkwardly against the gravity of our reality. Tommy looked between us, assessing the tension like a child sensing the crack in his parent's smile. "You sure it's nothing I can help with?" His sweet sincerity enveloped me like a warm blanket, pushing back the shadows that had threatened to consume me since Jonathan's words had cut through. "I think we'll be okay, Tommy," I said, forcing a smile that felt too tentative. "But thank you." With his characteristic charm, he returned to work, and as I watched him, hope blossomed anew. Tommy represented resilience. He had a light all his own, shining brightly against any darkness that dared to encroach. It was this flicker that reminded me why I was fighting. But Jonathan's warning pulsed in my mind, lingering like an ominous storm cloud overhead. I chided myself internally, focusing on what I could control rather than the uncertainty that suffocated the diner. Maybe all the pieces weren't aligned, but small moments of strength like Tommy's laughter could fortify me in times of peril. "Let's not dwell on him," I declared, bringing my attention back to Lena. "We need a plan. If we know something more about Jonathan, something that can help us understand why he's targeting us." She met my gaze, her fierce determination reigniting a sense of purpose. "We should start digging into his background. See if we can find any vulnerabilities, anything that gives us leverage." A shared knowledge settled between us. We were warriors of light against a looming shadow. But as night cloaked the diner, uncertainty slithered in, whispering fears of what Jonathan might do next. "Let's head to my place after closing," I suggested, and though I feared the potential consequences, I knew I couldn't let Jonathan dictate our next steps. We would confront the darkness together, armed with knowledge and unwavering strength. Soon, the diner emptied of patrons as each one drifted into their lives, oblivious to the narrative that had ensnared me. When the last customer waved goodbye, Lena and I began clearing tables, tension swirling inside like a tempest stirring toward chaos. Yet just as I wiped the last counter, the door swung open again, and the night air poured in, sharp and biting. My heart dropped as I turned. There stood a figure cloaked in shadows. My breath seized as I took in the familiar face of Violet, my childhood friend, now a striking silhouette framed against the neon lights outside. "Violet, what are you doing here?" I blurted, disbelieving and startled. Her presence felt like an unexpected gust of wind, both refreshing and foreboding. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steady but urgent. The gravity in her words caused a knot to coil tighter in my stomach. "Now?" Lena interjected with suspicion, her trust not yet extending to the stranger that had become tied to my childhood memories. "Yes, now," Violet replied tersely, stepping further into the diner, letting the door close behind her. "It's about Jonathan. I think you might be in more trouble than you realize." A chill caressed my spine, the weight of her words sinking in, mixing with the apprehension already coiling in my gut. "What do you know?" I demanded, stepping forward, desperation clawing at my throat. "He's been looking for you. Not just to intimidate you, there's something more, something personal. And it involves us." My breath hitched as the implications of her words crashed over me like a tidal wave, unraveling my perception of safety. Lena's hand shot out and clasped mine, lending a squeeze of solidarity. "What do you mean us?" I probed, my heart racing as pieces of a dark puzzle began to shift into place, illuminating the very shadows Jonathan thrived in. But before Violet could answer, a muffled explosion rattled the diner's windows, followed by a deafening blast that sent us all staggering backward. A gasp cut through the air as I grasped for the counter, my mind racing to comprehend what had just transpired as the chaos entered. Reality shifted once again, and raw fear settled in. I realized that not only was my fight against Jonathan looming, but I was also tangled within a much larger web, one that could ensnare everyone I had come to care about in the process. The diner felt like our last Wara hopeful haven crumbling under the strain of ominous currents. And as I faced the figure at my side, the question rang clear. Would we rise from the ashes, or would we be consumed by the blaze? In that moment, I understood one thing. The battle was only just beginning. The aftermath of the explosion knocked the breath from my lungs, and I stumbled back, Lena's grip on my hand the only lifeline connecting me to the ground beneath my feet. The din of shattering glass and the acrid smell of smoke filled the space, turning what had once been a refuge into a chaotic battlefield. "Stay down," Lena shouted, her voice cutting through the haze of confusion. But as I ducked instinctively, my gaze fixated on Violet, who stood frozen in shock, her eyes wide and unblinking. The connection we shared as childhood friends suddenly felt tenuous, overshadowed by the sinister uncertainty of her knowledge. "Violet, what did you mean about Jonathan?" I shouted, fighting to be heard over the sound of emergency sirens wailing in the distance. My heart raced, the implications of her arrival clashing violently with the wreckage surrounding us. She blinked, as if shaking herself from a dream, and then her expression shifted to one of fierce urgency. "You need to understand, not just after you. It's deeper. There are things you don't know about what happened back then." Those words hung in the air heavy with mystery and fear, scrambling my thoughts. Memories of our childhood flooded back, moments bathed in simple joys, games played beneath the warm sunlight, laughter shared, but also secrets buried deep in the past. "What do you know about our past?" I demanded, trying to reclaim control over the rising tide of anxiety. "Everything," Violet replied, urgency lacing her voice. "That summer it wasn't just chance. Jonathan knows things that could hurt you and others." "But why?" I asked, bewildered. "Why would he care about any of that? We're just people to him." A panicked look over her shoulder told me she felt the walls closing in. "You don't know him, not really. He doesn't want to intimidate you just for kicks. He wants revenge." As if summoned by her declaration, laughter echoed from the shadows beyond the diner, sharp and taunting. Struck me like ice water, deep, chilling, and unavoidable. My heart sank, the fear morphing into something darker. "Revenge for what? Because you," she paused, swallowing hard, "you were the last connection to a life he lost." The weight of her words bore down on me, but before I could respond, Lena bolted toward the kitchen. "I'll check the back," she called, a determined fire in her eyes. I wanted to follow her, but the layers of Violet's revelation kept me rooted in place. "Wait," I said, gripping her arm tightly. "What do you?" A second explosion shook the diner, this one sending a cascade of shattered glass raining down like deadly confetti. My instincts screamed to shield Violet, but in that fleeting moment, the world twisted and blurred. Time seemed suspended as fear wrestled with the realization that my past was not as buried as I thought. "Get down!" Lena yelled again, her voice a beacon piercing the chaos. My legs obeyed, collapsing to the ground beside Violet, our faces nearly touching as dust and debris swirled around us. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Tell me the truth. What did we do to him?" As Violet opened her mouth to speak, sirens blared closer now, red and blue flashing in through the broken windows, but no sound reached us. It became a world of muted chaos as she leaned in, urgency etched on her face. "Your family, the accident, it wasn't just an accident. It was Jonathan's family involved." A chill swept through my veins. No, that can't be true. Think. His family was destroyed that night too. He believes you and yours are to blame. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind. The accident. The tragedy that had forever altered our small town's fabric. I had always thought of it as a collective tragedy. But to accept that through Jonathan's eyes we were guilty was too much to bear. Before I could wrap my head around this derailing revelation, Tommy burst back into the diner, wild-eyed and breathless. "It's got to be evacuated. They're going to seal this place." I grabbed Tommy's shoulder, the confusion and fear pooling in my chest like heavy stones. "Tommy, we need to get out of here. Jonathan's coming for us." But even as I spoke those words, a shadow loomed outside, and it was then that my heart sank deeper. There, framed in the doorway, stood Jonathan. His dark presence was menacing, exuding an aura of control over the chaos around him. "Thought you could escape?" he taunted, his voice a low growl. "This is just the beginning." My mind raced, caught between a past I thought I understood and a present that was spiraling violently out of control. I glanced at Lena, who had returned with a baseball bat, her face steeled with resolve. A silent promise formed in that moment. Together we would stand. "Run!" I shouted to Violet and Tommy, as I stepped forwards, finding a flicker of courage in the storm of fear. But as they darted for the door, Jonathan's cold laugh echoed through the diner, bringing with it a suffocating sense of dread. I knew then, deep inside, that whatever came next would change everything. Nothing would be the same again. Unbeknownst to us, this storm was only setting itself in motion, and I was caught in its eye, gasping for breath as we prepared for whatever lay ahead. The world had become a cacophony of terror and uncertainty, each moment a harbinger of chaos as our feet pounded against the cracked linoleum floor. I glanced back at Lena, whose fierce grip on the bat was a symbol of defiance in a room overtaken by fear. As Jonathan's figure loomed closer, shadows draping around him like a cloak, I felt my heart race uncontrollably. We darted through the shattered threshold of the diner, and the cool night air hit me like a wave of clarity. I was conscious of everything: the distant wail of sirens, the tang of smoke in my lungs, the echo of our footsteps as we ran. But most poignantly, the consequence of our past clawed at me like a ghost I could not escape. "Where do we go?" Tommy panted, panic gripping his voice as he turned left, right, desperate for guidance. I felt the weight of my uncertainty like a heavy anchor. "Anywhere but here," I shouted, urging us onward to the nearby alley, dimly lit by flickering streetlights that did little to shield us from the reality chasing close behind. We turned the corner, desperately seeking refuge, but my mind swirled with the revelations weighing down my heart. "Violet," I called, spinning to make certain she was by my side. She stumbled into the alley entrance, her breath a series of sharp gasps as she reached out to my hand. I can't breathe," she admitted, her face pale with shock. "Just keep moving," Lena encouraged, her protective nature kicking into overdrive as she ushered us forward. I could see worry etching lines on her face, and I sought to buoy her spirit in a time when hope felt dim. As we reached the end of the alley, I saw the faint glow of headlights in the distance. It ignited something inside me, a flicker of courage amid the despair. "We can get to the main street. We'll find help." Tommy, though fear enveloped, nodded resolutely. "Let's hurry." But as we turned to sprint toward the light of freedom, the sound of footsteps echoed dangerously close behind us. My heart crashed against my ribcage, a visceral reminder of the threat we faced. I felt the jagged shards of anxiety creep deeper, but I was not yet ready to collapse. I am not leaving it like this, I breathed to Violet, who moved closer. We need to know why Jonathan blames us. We need the truth about that night. Not now, she gasped, her eyes darting toward the sound of bodies moving closer. Survival first. But even as the sirens intensified in the background, something inside me rebelled against hiding from our past. What if it doesn't end here? What if we don't escape? I asked, urgency coursing through my words. If we run, he will only keep coming. Suddenly, a moment of unexpected reprieve. A heavy door swung open nearby, and a weary figure stepped outside, cigarette smoke curling into the air. It was Stan, the diner's grizzled cook, who had always treated us with quiet kindness. He squinted against the headlights and quickly assessed the scene unfolding before him. What in the hell is happening? He asked, eyes wide with concern. Stan, you have to help us, I shouted, my desperation spilling over. Jonathan's after us for something he thinks we've done. We need to hide. Who? He barked, failing to grasp the gravity of our burgeoning crisis. But as another crash resounded behind us, he understood instinctively. Inside, he commanded, holding the door open wide. Now, we slipped into the sanctuary of the small storage room, its scent of aged wood and spices an odd comfort amid the turmoil. Stan closed the door just as a figure appeared at the entrance of the alley, casting a long shadow that stretched ominously within the dim light, a stark reminder that safety was fleeting. What do we do? Tommy voiced, his eyes darting nervously between us. Anxiety filled the air as we huddled together, the reality of our entrapment sinking heavy. I could hear a faint shuffling outside, breaths held tightly as we pressed ourselves against the wall. Violet, you have to tell us everything now, Lena urged, eyes fiercely determined. We can't hide forever. He thinks we took everything from him. That night, Violet choked, color draining from her already pale face. There's so much I didn't say. I buried it because it hurt too much. The uncertainty crackled like electricity in the air, and my pulse quickened. What are you not telling us? We can't fight enemies we don't know. I wasn't just a friend, she whispered, voice shivering. I was there. I saw it happen. Before I could process her words, a loud bang reverberated through the door, jolting us into a state of raw terror. I felt Lena's tightening grip on my arm, her fear palpable, as realization dawned. Jonathan was relentless. And this was the calm before the storm. And then I understood. The burden wasn't just Jonathan's. It was ours too, intertwined with our past. I opened my mouth to press Violet for details, but her eyes widened in horror at the sound of cracking wood. Listen, she breathed, voice quaking with the weight of her truth. If he finds out, but the door splintered, Jonathan's shadow looming larger as the darkness poured into our hiding place. Just as panic surged within me, Violet took a step forward. I need to tell him the truth first, she whispered, determination igniting behind her fear-filled eyes. The unthinkable collided with my heart, a mixture of dread and hope as she steeled herself to confront the storm. And in that moment, with the threat of Jonathan breathing down our necks and Violet poised to reveal what she had buried, I realized the battle was only just beginning. The darkened storage room felt smaller as Jonathan's silhouette swallowed the dim light at the entrance. My heart drummed in my chest, a frantic rhythm punctuated by the heavy breath of my friends. Violet, no. I clawed for her arm, but she had already taken a step forward, resolute in her decision. A resolute silhouette against the encroaching darkness. Oh, stop, Lena hissed, her voice a desperate whisper. But Violet pressed on, a brave soul ready to face the unknown. Jonathan, wait, she called out, her voice trembling yet steady. Let me explain. Explain what? He shot back, venom lacing his words as he kicked the door wider, the wood cracking in protest under his force. What's there to explain? You all turned your back on me. You were supposed to be my friends. My own heart clenched. tethered between the violent urgency of the moment and the gentle understanding of what Violet was attempting. "This isn't the way, Jonathan," I shouted, stepping protectively in front of her as if to shield her from the storm brewing in his eyes, with a snarl etched across his face. He advanced further into the room. "You think you know betrayal? You have no idea what betrayal feels like. Then let me show you," Violet began, her voice trembling but strong. "Let me tell you everything, and then you can decide if I'm still a part of your story. Just give me a chance." His stance faltered for a heartbeat, uncertainty flickering through the chaos, a moment of humanity spearing through the haze of anger. "A chance? What do you want from me? Do you think I want to hear more of your lies?" "No lies," she promised, eyes glistening like reality undistorted. "The truth is weighty. I know it weighs on you, but it weighs on me too, and I've carried it for far too long." The tension coiled tightly, a snake poised to strike, as Jonathan's expression shifted from rage to something far more dangerous: hurt, abandonment, confusion. "You think you can just step back into my life and give me some half-hearted explanation? You can't undo what happened." "Maybe not," Violet countered, her voice soaring despite the fear that threatened to consume her. "But I can tell you what I know, what happened that night. You need to hear it." I felt the air thrum with the sense of impending admission. Our lives teetering on the edges of secrets unraveling and unspoken truths emerging. Jonathan's anger morphed into something deeper, more vulnerable. I dared to hope that her courage might spark understanding instead of rage. He hesitated, breathing angrily, struggling within himself. "You think that sharing your truth will fix everything? You erased my trust. You erased what we were." With an unyielding gaze, Violet took a deep breath, her vulnerability laid bare. "No, I lost it all too, Jonathan. You think I walked away unscathed? I've lived with the pain every single day." The weight of her words became tangible, and I could see the flickers of doubt in Jonathan's eyes. But he shook his head defiantly, mouth pressed into a thin line. "You have no idea how much you've hurt Methan. Let me show you." She pressed, edging closer. "Jonathan, you can't move forward when you're clinging to the past like a lifeline. I need you to understand that incredible loss is not a singular journey. We all felt it, and we all lost something precious that night." "Maybe," he conceded slowly, though the bite of pain remained sharp in his voice. "But what if the truth just shatters whatever's left?" "Then let it shatter," Violet replied softly, tears welling in her eyes as she reached toward him cautiously. "Let's rebuild it. Together. You don't have to face this alone." The crack in his facade deepened, raw emotions surfacing in waves. Memories swirled like autumn leaves caught in a storm. The laughter, the dreams they carved together, all twisted into pain and resentment. But as quickly as that flicker of connection sparked, the ghost of doubt loomed larger. "You think you can just fix me?" he murmured, eyebrows drawn tightly together, as if wrestling with demons only he could see. "No," she whispered, "but I can help you find the way out. Please just listen." Before Jonathan could reply, a sudden, jarring noise erupted outside, a cascading sound of metal crashing against wood, shattering the fragile piece. Instantly, our hearts dropped, and a rush of dread infused the air. "Lena," I shouted, not understanding why I had turned to her when we should all be focused on Jonathan. But when I glanced at my friends, I realized Lena had already darted toward the door, a glint of determination flaring in her eyes. "Get back," she cried, chest heaving as she flung the door open wide. The world outside rushed to greet us. Jonathan recoiled as if the abruptness of our reality clawed at the remnants of his own sanity. The darkness and chaos of the night loomed ever closer, swallowing our moment whole. A figure rushed into our small, cramped space, a shadow tinged with desperation, and I instantly recognized him as our teammate, Marco, eyes wide and frantic. "They're coming. We need to go." Panic surged through me as the gravity of our situation gleamed anew, but as I glanced back to check on Violet and Jonathan, I saw them standing at the threshold of a precarious choice. Perhaps it wasn't just one truth that needed unveiling, but an entire tapestry of hidden realities that threatened to bind us all together or tear us apart for good. Where is truth in this mess? I wondered silently as the chaos consumed us, marking a new chapter of uncertainty, leaving my heart raw with fear of what was yet to come. As we stood in the storage room, the world outside swallowed by chaos, I felt the weight of unspoken truths settling over us like a suffocating fog. The initial explosion was a cruel reminder, every loud bang heralding a reality I had thought safely tucked away, yet now it loomed viscerally present. Violet's eyes bore into Jonathan's, a fragile resolve pulsing between them. "Whatever happened that night ripped apart lives," she said, her voice steady despite the tempest swirling around us. "If we don't come together now, we'll all drown in the fallout." Jonathan's fierce facade cracked just a bit more. I could see the conflict within him, pain battling anger, resentment mingling with a flicker of understanding. It was there, suspended in air thick with a desperate need for resolution. "You have no idea how hard it's been for me," he said, and it hung in the air heavy as stone. "I know," Violet replied softly, the weight of empathy in her eyes, "because it bruised us all. But holding onto this resentment will only tear us further apart." "Enough!" he suddenly barked, shaking off the burden of her words. He seemed to draw on whatever twisted resolve remained. "You think any of this matters? You've already chosen to run, haven't you? Just like you did that night." "No," I interjected, my voice a raw whisper against the tide of his animosity. "No one ran that night, Jonathan. We were all trapped by the choices others made, trapped by the circumstances imposed upon us." He flinched, and in that moment of vulnerability, I pressed on. "But we can choose what happens next. It doesn't have to end like this." And just as I felt the stirrings of newfound resolve gathering in the air between us, a deafening crash echoed outside, followed by Marco's voice. "Get down. They're coming for you." The air vibrated with urgency as eyes widened around us and fear gripped my heart once more. In an instant, the lines were drawn again, darkness swirling just outside our haven as we were faced with a critical choice. To succumb, or to rise and take whatever strength we had left. "Violet," I called, turning to her. "You need to run. You can't let him take you. Not again." But she shook her head, determination flaring in her eyes. "No, I'm done running from this. I've hidden for too long, living in the shadows of my own fears. It ends here." There was something fiercely empowering in her words. It became a shared sentiment, a tether binding us in this moment of truth. "And if Jonathan's anger is at us for a past we didn't create?" I asked, my heart pounding with the energy of buried fears coming to life. "If we can lean into the wounds afterward, it may just be a start." Jonathan's seething anger shifted briefly as he regarded us, uncertainty climbing through. "You want to play the hero? You think that this will fix everything?" "No," I replied, my voice laced with grit. "But acceptance may just be the most powerful step we can take now. We cannot rewrite the past, but we can redefine our futures." Lena slipped into position beside me, the bat firmly gripped in her hands. "Let's do this together. Whatever awaits us out there," she declared, addressing both Jonathan and the shadows lurking right beyond our threshold. "We all face it together." Surging adrenaline spurred me forward. This isn't about defining enemies. It's about rebuilding bonds. Whatever tragedies laced our lives, we have a chance to reforge what's broken. We all shared a moment of fragile unity glimmering amidst the rubble of our connecting histories. The air hummed, charged with unbroken resilience as we stood poised to confront whatever lay ahead together. We could unite our stories into one coherent thread, one honest tale of surrender and trust. But there remained that echo, brutal and raw. Jonathan's eyes flared with something intense, a fierce reckoning, as his fists clenched by his sides. "And if this ends in more destruction, then at least we faced it," I countered, instead of letting it tear us apart with silence. With a heavy heart and an aching soul, I stepped towards the door, the weight of every lost possibility. Behind me, the threshold lay before us, darkness pooling around our feet, a cacophony growing louder with every passing second outside. And when we stepped into that darkness surrounded by the clamor of the past and its ramifications, it felt at last like I was ready to finally face the weight of everything I had hidden from. Just as we gathered ourselves, the door swung open wide, revealing an endless black night refilled with shadows. But standing within the threshold, armed with a newfound resolution, there was warmth spreading in my chest, a promise that in acceptance lay the key to forgiveness. I am ready, I whispered, glancing back over my shoulder at the friends beside Met, his ragtag remnant bound by fate and the need for resolution. And in that moment, as the cold night air rushed in, I realized I wasn't just stepping into darkness. I was stepping towards the light, because though it may have felt like the end, perhaps it was in fact the singular beginning of everything. Together, we took that first step into the unknown, and I felt the weight of every fracture in my heart begin to mend. The burden of pain and guilt now had hope to cling to, an inkling of possibility shimmering on the horizon where shadows could not reach, because we were no longer just victims of our past. We were warriors with stories yet to be told. And with that realization, the finality of my last breath fell away. What awaited us was not just darkness, but the potential to change each other's lives with the power of truth and acceptance. Let's find our way home, I said softly, glancing back once more at Jonathan. He stood lost, but even in his gaze sparkled a fragment of longing for all we had lost and for all we could still become, if only we would dare to walk forward. And as we stepped together into the tumultuous storm, I knew this journey was meant for us to share, no matter what the outcome. It was now or never, and the first breath of freedom felt an awful lot like love.